Welcome back to the Way of the Other Dragons podcast. In this episode today, we're going to talk again about kata. Last time we spoke about the ideas how to read kata, and today we're going to focus more on the broader approach. What is kata and forms, and we call it Kata 2.0. So without further ado, we're going to introduce the fellow podcasters. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Tim.
And hello, Amy.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say I'm thrilled to have Robert here this time. I've been itching to do this Kata 2.0 because Robert couldn't be here last time, and we wanted to do it again recently, and I couldn't make it, and then Tim couldn't make it, and now we finally have all of our Kata nerds here in one place, and I'm really excited to do this.
I'm really excited, too. Thank you. I don't call what I do kata, but we do what we call a form. It's basically the same thing, but in Chinese martial arts, we call it a form instead of a kata. But it's basically the same thing, right?
Yeah, let's start with the definition of what kata or form translates to, or what is meant by the term.
Yeah, that's a
Anybody
good point.
wants to start?
Is it different? Is it different? Is kata different than a form? That's something I've actually honestly wondered. Like, what's the difference?
If you translate the term kata to English, it is translated as form. So the Japanese have not only kata in martial arts, everything that is formalized is referred to as kata. So they have tea ceremonies, that is a kata. The way they put out their shoes and align it before they enter a room, that is a kata. Everything they do in a formalized way can be called kata, or it is a form. It's a formal way of behavior or formal way of movement.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that, and I didn't know that. That's really cool.
So, on my way back home today, I thought about a little analogy I came up with. Before my daughter went to school, she was drawing letters and was trying to write simple sentences. And the way she drew the single letters was very different to the way she will learn it at school. So in school, they're going to learn a formalized way of how to draw a letter. And by that form, they are able to have the flow in handwriting. Without that, they wouldn't be able to it. So even the little kids in school learning to write, they do some kind of kata, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, it definitely does.
It does, because I just started reading this book on Sanchin Kata, and he makes analogies exactly like that with kids learning how to write letters. So I don't know. Did you come up with that on your own, or have you read the book too?
I don't know the book. I was just driving home from the gig and I was thinking, well, what would be a good analogy? And I was just thinking about my daughter, and that was what I came up with.
Yeah, that's awesome. He said the exact same thing. That's wonderful.
So how, I mean, it might be hard to explain, but so how your daughter is naturally trying to do it different from what the school would try and do?
First off, it's hard to explain it in English. They're the block letters, not connected to each other.
Right.
So she was she was writing in that style. She was writing the letter A from beginning on the bottom right, rising up and going diagonal down left.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So the way that you actually do it, she was trying to replicate what she had seen, but it wasn't the way that it's normally taught, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and
I think
by that, kata is, like I said, everything in a formal way. So, last episode, Ricky Spanish said, we can see kata in boxing like 1-2, 1-2 combinations. Doing it over and over again, that's kata, or it's a formalized way of doing it.
Yeah, can I disagree with that a little bit?
I kind of felt the same way.
So we were talking in the last episode about the difference between kata and drills, and I've since talked to Eric Sensei and Joe Sensei about this. And so what I said at that time was, to me, kata tells a story, and drills are just like a piece of that. And Eric Sensei said that to him, what makes a kata versus a drill is kata is attack agnostic. That the moves in a kata have to work almost no matter what comes in. It needs to work against a high percentile number of attacks. I mean, we generally shoot for 90-something% of attacks coming in. This set of moves is going to work against it. If what you're doing depends on you knowing what's coming in, that's a drill. And Joe Sensei pretty much agreed. When I was talking to Joe Sensei about this the other night, I said that also, in my opinion, kata, the purpose of kata is to transmit information over time and space and language barriers. And he agreed with that. And he said that kata is the study of a fight from one person's point of view, from the defender's point of view. A drill is one piece of that. A drill is an analysis of one piece of that fight. But the kata is basically the recording through movement of a fight from the defender's point of view. What do you guys think about that?
Okay, in karate terms, I totally agree with you, Amy. In the general definition of formalized behavior, I think drill is also, it is formalized. Like the Kihon Kumite we do in karate. It's formalized, but it's every time it's the same movements like we do in kata, or at least in the solo form, not in the application. But that is another stage of martial arts.
And what do you think, Robert?
So basically what you're saying, I mean, to me, yeah, drill is like, okay, you throw a right punch that comes from my head, I do a certain technique, block it, whatever, intercept it, and do this other move. Yeah, I agree with that. Where I not necessarily disagree, but what's different is our forms are not a fight. Our forms are more of like a dictionary or the alphabet. It's like you learn the form in order to learn certain shapes you use with your arms, certain concepts, principles, whatnot. It's not like necessarily someone punches at me and I do this and then I do this. It's more of learning the basic shapes. To me, I mean, other people describe it as like a dictionary. To me, it's more like an alphabet. You learn A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. You're learning these different shapes you do with your arms. It doesn't necessarily mean if an attack comes in, I go A, B, C, D, E. It's more of I could pick from any one of those, but I know them all because I do my form. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I don't think that differs from us too much, other than I think our kata, just from what I know versus what I've seen from you Wing Chun guys do, I think our kata is more directly, like, Joe Sensei said recording of a fight, and yours is more a teaching tool of different techniques. Is that right?
Well, it's a teaching tool, and it's a generalized, a teaching tool is a good way to put it. It's that if you have someone come in and they come to your school, whatever, and they say, I want to learn Wing Chun, we're not going to tell them how to fight. We're going to say, okay, here's the basic shapes you make. Here is their purpose. Here is their application. Here is the principles behind why we do what we do. And all of that is in the forms. So, like, the first form of Wing Chun is basically the ABCs. The second form of Wing Chun, which is called Chum Q. So the first form is Silam Tao. It's literally the most basic techniques while you're just standing still. There is no foot movement. There's no footwork, anything. It's all about the hands. Then once you go to Chum Q, which is the second form, you integrate footwork with the handwork, and that's where it starts to, in my mind, becomes like forming sentences with the words you learned in the Silam Tao, which is the first form. And then you go to BUG, which is the third form, where it's like kind of like you're now writing paragraphs or even a whole essay. You know what I mean? And then there's the wooden dummy where you're basically applying all of that. And if you're comparing it to words, that's kind of something we can all relate to. That's the way I see it. So it's not like in the form, it's like, okay, if someone punches at you, you do this part of the first form, the second form. I mean, there is a little bit of that, but not really. It's much more of a structured, system-based teaching of the techniques and principles. And then you, as a person, needs to learn how to deal with different attacks and situations with those things that you've learned, much like in a debate. You learn a language, you learn how to debate, you learn how to argue, stuff like that, but it all comes from learning a system that starts with the ABCs, go to sentences, go to paragraphs, and then it's up to you as a practitioner to apply them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Hopefully that made sense. I know it was kind of convoluted and weird when you compare a language to martial arts, but that's kind of the way I've chosen to see it.
No, that makes sense. And we compare language to martial arts in a little bit different way, but it's close enough that makes total sense to me.
Let me just add this. When someone comes to class, when they're first learning the Silam Tao, which is the first form, they're sitting there going, okay, I'm doing this hand movement. How does this apply to combat? And you kind of have to tell them, you know, it does, and here's why, but you're going to have to wait to use it until you really see why. You know what I mean? Like, it's not always clear in the beginning, kind of like how does CA end up forming a word. Once you end up learning it, you later learn how to apply it. It's not direct. From what you guys have said, it kind of sounds like your kata is more like a punch comes in, you do this, you move like that, and then you throw them or something. And our forms aren't necessarily directly relatable to a specific attack or situation. Am I wrong on that?
It's whatever attack comes in. It could be a punch, it could be a grab and punch, it could be a double grab. The punch could be high, the punch could be mid. If you have to, going back to what both Eric Sensei and Joe Sensei said, if the technique works only because you know what's coming in, it's not kata. It's a drill. It has to work on a wide variety of attacks. And a lot of times when I'm learning a new kata and Eric Sensei is showing me the attack, it's like, hey, do you want to see the application? Sure. Said, okay, attack me. How do you want me to attack you? And he goes, it don't matter. You're going to end up on the ground anyway. So, okay, fine, I'll throw a punch. And he'll intercept it in some way and then do the next move, which usually tangles me up. Or if I pull back, that's even better because you're anticipating nobody throws a punch and hangs it. So I throw the punch and I start to pull back, and that actually makes the second move work even better because I just walked into his mousetrap, and then I struggle to try to get away again, and then the next move defeats my struggle, and the next thing I know, I'm on the ground. And he said, okay, well, that was fun. Do a different attack. Okay, so this time I'm going to double lapel grab. So I grab him, and he intercepts this exact same move, but it intercepts my two hands differently than it did my one fist. So then I struggle a different way to pull back, or maybe I don't try to pull back, maybe I try to continue the attack, and he's ready for it with the next move and tangles me up again, and I'm on the ground again. I get up and goes, okay, attack me a different way. Okay, so now I'm going to grab one wrist and then punch him with my other fist, and the same thing. So it doesn't matter what attack comes in, the exact same series of moves, I'm going to end up on the ground.
Okay, so here's where it's making me think. Okay, so let's put it into something visual, okay? You and me are standing face to face. If I throw a high left hook for your head, you may do a series of movements to put me on the ground, as you said. Now, if I throw a left, it's the same arm, but down for your kidney, are you going to do the same movements, or is it similar but different? And if so, does it require a different kata in order to know how to react to the two different levels? Because in Wing Chun, we have what's called the 6 gates. You have a high left, high right, mid left, mid right, bottom left, bottom right. And we would do completely different techniques depending on which gate it goes for. Do you guys have different katas for that, or is it doesn't matter type of thing?
The kata shows you a technique as a idea of, or it displays a principle how to react. So you don't have to necessarily follow the form exactly if you understand the underlying principle of the kata itself. So if, like you said, visually you're throwing a left hook, I can go exactly with the kata motion. If I'm a little bit deeper into the kata, I can take the principle the kata taught me and adapt it to the incoming technique.
Okay, and that makes sense. No, it does. Yeah, I mean, there's concepts and principles, but like if someone throws something for my head, I'm going to use a completely different technique than if they throw something for my lower gate. You know, they're going for my kidney or something. It's a completely different technique, but yes, I may use the same principle. Like if it's a really hard motion, I'm not going to meet it with force. I'm going to maybe absorb it and use it against them, which would be more of a principle or concept type of thing. Whether it's high or low or completely different techniques, I may apply a different principle or concept. And that's where what you're saying kind of resonates with what we do, I guess, at least from what you're saying, is that it's not about the technique. It might be a high, it might be a low, it might be a mid, but the concept or principle you learn from the form applies regardless. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what that's what I was trying to say.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. So, do you guys have a list of, or something that you all agree upon are concepts and principles within each kata, or that just applies throughout the whole entire system, or does that vary from style to style?
A single kata represents a whole self-defense system. So in one kata there's at least everything you need to know to be proficient in self-defense, like intercepting. Also, every principle is there. It's only displayed in a different way. So, like you and me, we use different techniques because it fits our body type. And that's how the old masters came up with their kata. One was small and quick, so the kata represents his way of movements and how he would apply the principles. Other people are large and strong, so the principles are still there, but the technical execution differs.
That makes sense. Where I'm trying to, because I've literally never done any Japanese martial art whatsoever. I've never done anything but Wing Chun. I'm really trying to understand how you can have so many different kata, and I want to understand it. And what you just said is really kind of confusing to me. So okay, so like Amy, how many different kata do you do?
I am currently learning 34 kata. That doesn't include another couple dozen that I've learned and forgotten in my lifetime. But I'm
Okay,
currently working on and learning 34.
so what does each one of those kata represent for you? I mean, that to me that's mind blowing. I mean, just doing the first form of Wing Chun, I feel like I could spend my whole life trying to learn it and never master it. So what does each one of those kata represent to you? What do they mean to you? Because like me, for me, with the Silam Tao Wing Chun, I feel like I could do it literally my whole life, every single day, and I would never really master it. I would get better and become more proficient, and it would convert to how I apply my Wing Chun, but there's no way you could ever really master it. So to me, the idea of doing 34 different forms, I'm just like, you're
It's
so
crazy,
what?
insane.
Well, it's just so what does not necessarily because I think what you're doing it's as good as what I'm doing. But what does each one of those mean to you? Do they mean a different
Yeah.
situation? Do they mean a different principle?
Yeah, they're each teaching different lessons, and I agree that when you learn a kata, you're going to study it your whole life, which is why I said I'm currently learning 34. Even though some of the kata that I'm working on, I first learned 2 to 3 years ago. I think in my current set of kata, the first one I learned was the Shihonagi sword meditation. I learned that almost exactly 3 years ago, but I'm still learning it. I'm still learning new things from it. And all my kata, so I'm never in my life going to say I am finished learning from this kata. That's never going to happen. You're always learning something new. And especially when you're talking about something like the Naihachis, which Tim also has in his system, that's so nuanced and that's so, there's so much in there. And Naihachi Shodan, which is traditionally taught first, to show that to a beginning student and say, this is a complete fighting system right here, it's just mind blowing. And it's probably a lot like your first kata, your first form. So that new student walks in and this is a complete system. It's like, are you kidding me? What are you talking about? So I'd already known Eric Sensei for quite some time, and before he taught me that. And I met Joe Sensei that night, but I knew him through reputation. So when they're like, okay, trust us, this is going to make sense to you eventually, I totally trusted them. But to answer your question, what does each kata mean? Naihachi Shodan is basic stand-up grappling. Naihachi Nidan, I'm still struggling with that one a lot, so I'm not going to skip over that. Naihachi Sandan is putting a lot of hip action into these same basic movements. Those three kata are very similar. And I think they used to be, is this right, Tim? They used to all be one kata? All the Naihachis were originally taught as one kata, and then they got broken up into the three?
Historically, this is incorrect.
That is, okay.
Cool. There was Naihanshi Shodan or Teki Shodan, and Teki Nidan or Naihanshi Nidan and Sandan, they just show a wider variety of the same principles. Because all the Naihanshi kata are stand-up or stand-up grappling.
Right. But to me, in the way we do Naihachi Sandan, there's a lot more hip action into the same basic movements. If you make your hips follow your hands during the blocks, there's going to be a lot more hip action, which you can then go back and apply to Shodan and Nidan. But it really shows up, in our opinion, in Sandan. But one of the reasons, trying to answer the question, which is such a huge question, what do all these different kata mean for me? A lot of my kata is weapons. And for me, each weapon teaches something different. Not only does each kata teach a different principle, but each weapon teaches something different. And Eric Sensei's whole thing is, if your weapons kata doesn't make you a better empty-hand fighter, it has no place in the modern world. I disagree. I think weapons are cool. To me, that's good enough. But I understand what he's saying, and I really appreciate what he's saying. With my whole history of the martial arts, of training for a few years, something happens in my life and I have to stop. Knowing these kata and being able to use my weapons as a training partner to give me feedback is extraordinarily important. And I wish I had learned this decades ago. I'd be a lot farther in my martial arts today if I had. So,
see, from what you've said, I'm sorry to interrupt you. From what you've said, and I've heard you say this before, the weapons train you as if they're an opponent. They're not a weapon you're going to use against your opponent. They are the opponent, right?
Yeah, well, my training partner, but yeah. So Joe was my first weapon, and that taught me basic standard grappling. I next got started on bow, and I'm 5'2". I use a standard 6-foot bow, and it was hard for me to wield just the same way it's hard for me to wield a 6-foot tall man who's not going to give. So it's directly applicable. Me swinging around this weapon, me manipulating this big, huge, stiff stick, is directly applicable to me throwing around big, huge men. And where this really came home to me was when I learned Seiyuchi no Kunichi. There's some turns in it that the first couple times I did those turns, it's a full turn almost a 360-degree turn, and you come out of it and you do a strike. And the first few times I did that, I knocked myself off balance. Turning around with this big 6-foot-long stick in my hand took me 2 to 3 times to figure out how to move my feet a little more efficiently, so that way I was not throwing myself off balance. 2 days later, I'm in my Aikido class, and we're doing Irimi Nage, and suddenly I can throw big, huge men a lot better than I could 2 days earlier. And I realized it was the stepping that I had figured out on the bow directly translated to improving my Irimi Nage in Aikido. And every weapon has something different that it can offer me like that. I also have a tendency to over-rotate my strikes. And one of Eric Sensei's things is the bow is a compass for your hips, where the bow is pointing, that your hips are pointing the same way. So now I can see, as I'm throwing a strike with my bow, I can see exactly where my hips are pointing because the bow is going to be pointing that direction. So it's helping to fix that. With my tonfas, again, hip action. When I flip the tonfas from down to up, that's done more with my hips than with my wrists. So I'm getting that hip action. I'm learning that hip switch and getting really good at that. Plus, as it comes back, it hits my forearm, it conditions my forearm. And same with the bow. As that comes in, hits my forearm, it conditions my forearm. And size, similarly, is teaching me how to clear a space. You have to flip the size more in front. The tendency to do it quickly, the size might point back at you slightly as you're in the middle of the flip. Well, that's obviously dangerous. If you're fighting with somebody and you're pointing your own weapon at yourself, that's not a good thing. So it's teaching me how to better think about the space in front of me and how to clear that space. Let's see, what other weapons do I have? I'm going to do Keko soon. That's going to teach me how to punch more efficiently. And I'm not going to get Thomas until I'm black belt. Oh, and Echo. I'm going to get an Echo soon as well. Is that all my weapons? I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, Tonbo. I just started Tonbo. I haven't figured out exactly what that's going to teach me yet, because I just started learning that kata a couple days ago.
Well, I think that's really cool that all the different weapons teach you something that relates to open hand combat. Because, I mean, who walks around with sais or a bow in
Yes.
normal life? It's not, you don't. I mean, unless you're really weird. But that's really cool because I've always wondered why people focus so much on these weapons that they're never going to carry around. I always thought it was just they thought the weapon was cool, which is fine, but
Yeah, that's good enough for me.
well, and I know it is because weapons are cool, but and that's cool to think weapons are cool, but you've found a way to think weapons are cool and also apply it to reality. And I think the same thing in Wing Chun. We have the butterfly knives and the wooden dummy, and we also have the pole. And you're never going to walk around with butterfly knives or a pole. And you have to figure out how to apply that to your hands, and anybody who's really proficient knows how to. I mean, unless it's just a hobby. But what I was curious about was exactly that. Like, why do you practice all these weapon forms? And if they do apply, how? And you basically answered that for me. I mean, it makes sense. If you have a big bow, if you're learning how to throw, bigger people, stuff like that. And how to use these weapons to apply to empty hand, because really that's all we're trying to do ultimately, right?
Yeah, nobody's going to attack me with when I have sais or tonfas or whatever in my hand unless they're incredibly stupid. Or if I happen to be standing with the trunk of my car open and they're available to me and somebody's stupid enough to try to attack me right then and I just reach in and grab a weapon. But yeah, I don't anticipate to ever have any of these weapons except maybe a Joe, because you can use those as walking sticks. That's the only one that I might ever actually have in my hand if I get attacked. But with my whole history of the martial arts of training for a few years and stopping, if I had known this then, if I had known that I could have used weapons as a training partner, and if I'd known how to read katas then, like I know now, those years I took off from training because of family obligations, I could have continued to train myself and taught myself. And so that's one of the things that Joe Sensei and Eric Sensei are teaching me, is how to teach myself. So if, God forbid, this happens to me again, I can continue to learn.
So I have a question for Tim. Do you think that there's a certain order? So in Wing Chun, to me, learning Chum Q, which is in my system the second form, first would be completely ludicrous. If you learn Chum Q before you learn Silam Tao, you're part of a McDojo ridiculous school. So within karate, is there a certain set of kata you need to learn in order, or is it kind of just whatever you learn, they all are independent?
Looking at the curriculum we have worldwide spread on different styles, there are the Heian or Pinan kata that are widely taught to beginners because these five kata or these five forms are meant to be a fighting system for themselves. So they are cut into five different pieces, teaching different lessons. For self-defense, this is where most schools start. But I don't think that is necessarily the right way to go. A lot of history books show that old masters like Funakoshi or Itosu, they started learning Naihanchi. So Naihanchi is a very basic kata. If somebody starts with another kata like Jion or Basaidai, it's okay. They are not building on each other because they are independent fighting systems. Only the fact that today we know that there are so many kata out there. Shitoryu has over 70 kata in total. You never get to study all these kata in depth, but you can, oh my head, you can start with any kata and learn it and get a whole holistic fighting system out of one kata. So they are not necessarily building on each other like in Wing Chun, like you explained it.
Wow, see, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, you explained it well. To me, I can't wrap my head around that because I guess I need to go and take like some really good karate classes and see how it works because I can't wrap my head around that.
I'll show you when you come visit in a couple months in July.
Yeah, I would love to because yeah, I've never encountered anybody who could explain it or show me, and it doesn't make sense to me because I see it more of a system of you first learn back to the language, the alphabet, then you learn how to make sentences and paragraphs. You learn, to me, each different form or kata, meaning a different fighting system, is mind-blowing to me because I'm like, I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it. So I really enjoy talking about it because I'm starting to kind of get an idea of what you guys are talking about, and it really opens my eyes to the whole karate side of things because previously I've just seen it as more of a display than actually a system of here's what you do and this is what you do if this comes in.
Well, if I can explain it kind of how Joe Sensei especially has explained it to me, because, I mean, we have a ton of kata. I mean, I am not even halfway through the system, and I'm at 34, but that's also, I do multiple styles. So that's my 34 kata that I'm currently learning includes Aikido, Tai Chi, and the seminar katas that I do. But still within our system, I think Eric Sensei currently is working on 77 kata. I think he's, in his lifetime, learned well over 100, but he's kept 77 as his core, if you can believe that. And Joe Sensei is a little bit under that. I want to say 45, 50-ish, if I remember correctly, which is still a huge amount. And this is where we describe it as a decision tree, that if you know 100 different ways to defend against a punch coming in, and a punch is coming in, you're going to freeze because your decision tree is too big. You need to whittle it down to a decision stick. So you need to have a core of maybe 10 or 12 core defenses that work for you, your body, your injuries, your life experiences, your psychology. So the way it was described to me is in our system we have maybe 100 different techniques, 100 different defenses. And I have to learn all 100 well enough to teach the next person. But from that 100, I have to whittle it down to my own personal 10. And once I get my personal 10, that's what I concentrate on for my own personal fighting style. If I only learn 10, if I forget the other 90-ish, then I can't teach the next person because my 10 won't be the right 10 for them. Of my 10, they might choose only one, and I've done them a huge disservice. So one reason we have so many kata and we learn just an insane amount of stuff is so we can teach the next person. But in reality, for ourselves, we only need 10. And for me, this is a big thing we were talking about at Violence Dynamics because I do so many different systems. I have a decision forest. I don't have a decision tree. I have several decision trees. I have a decision forest. And I need to start whittling that down to about 10 self-defense movements that work for me personally. And at the moment, I'm at 2. So all these different styles, all these techniques, I have 2 that I've chosen so far as my own personal defense system. Obviously, I need more. I need about, 8 more, but I'll get there. And I'm still learning all these kata, so I'm learning things from the kata going, this might work for me. This feels right to me. But then when we start doing self-defense drills and sparring, then I'll start figuring out, does it really work for me? Is this really one of the 10 that I want to keep?
Yeah, I totally agree. Historically, if you try to reach out to the masters of old, every one of them says, well, it is recommended to be proficient in 2 to 3 to 5 kata at maximum. So these kata are your in and outs your basis on principles of fighting. The huge amount of kata, like Amy said, is to pass the knowledge on and let another person find for themselves which works best for them. So this is why we have this ridiculous amount of kata in total. I mean, it's said that Maduni Sensei, he collected over 100 kata in total. He was called the technician. He was collecting this kata just out of curiosity, but he wasn't able to explain every application from every kata, and he wasn't definitely not able to utilize every kata in a confrontation. But he knew this kata to pass the knowledge on. Let's move on a little from here, if it's okay.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. In our lineage, as far as passing on the information of the application, a lot of that is discovered in the moment. You know, hey, Sensei, what's the application to this movement? I don't know. Why don't you attack me and we'll see what happens.
Well, and that's exactly everything you guys have been saying. You know, like within the first form of Wing Chun, the Silam Tao, which you usually study for years before you move on to the second form if you're in a good school. Literally, I mean, it's probably kind of hard for you guys to wrap your head around, but in a good Wing Chun school, you will only learn the first form for years. One form. And within that form, there's infinite different ways to interpret all the movements. It's like what you guys are saying. Like a Tan Sao, which is like a palm up, it's just basically like putting your hand out like you're holding a serving tray, would have multiple different applications depending on how you interpret it, depending on how it's taught to you, depending on the situation. And, you know, we have all these movements, and like recently when I went out to Texas and studied with a completely different lineage within Wing Chun, we have lineages. I don't know if it's the same within karate, but
yeah,
it is.
We all do the same movements. We all do the same shapes, but the way that people interpret them are completely different. And like when I went out there, their interpretation of these shapes was different. Their application of these shapes was different. We all do the same shapes, but we use them differently. And there's, even within a lineage or a school even, you have different people who use them differently and apply them differently, and that's where really it becomes a martial quote artist. You're the artist of the martial art, and you're using these shapes and these movements differently. And that's the way I see the forms, is they teach you the movements, they teach you the shapes, they teach you the concepts, principles. You then learn to apply them differently based on your own interpretation and application of the situation.
It's the same in karate. I really dislike organizations, associations, or schools which say our bunkai, which is the karate term for application or application training. This bunkai is set in stone. This is the motion. This is what it's meant to be, and there's nothing else allowed to. If you ever encounter something like that, run.
My senseis would totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. My senseis would agree. And that was the thing that sort of sucked me into the system, was when I first started training with Eric Sensei on the Joe staff. And again, the question, what's the application? I don't know, attack me and let's see what happens. And I was like, whoa, how are you doing that? How can you just think so fluidly on your feet when an attack comes in and you're doing, you know, the exact same set of motions that you did for one attack for another, and yet it's all working in these different ways. I mean, that's what really sucked me in to the system and to our style.
Yeah, in my school, if you ask my Sifu, like, if I do this, what are you going to do? He would say, it depends. I mean, throw it at me and I'll show you. There is no, like, if someone throws a hook punch, what do you do? That's a very narrow-minded question. That's not looking at the big picture.
And that's the best phrase in martial arts ever. It depends. And it's the most honest.
Yeah. Agreed.
The self-defense side of forms and kata. Let's move on to the idea of what uses of forms of kata we can also find, like meditation and motion. What do you guys think of that?
That's totally what we do. Do you guys do that, Robert?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's that whole side of it, too. You go ahead first.
For us, meditation and motion, there's a lot to that. And again, with the goal of my senseis to get me to teach myself, to learn how to teach myself, is when a lot of times when I do kata, they'll ask me, so how did that feel? And a lot of times I'll answer, well, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. You know, I'm critiquing myself and like that. No, that's not what we asked. How did that feel? What did that feel like to you? And I'm not really used to karate teachers being all touchy-feely like that. And it took them a while to get that way, because at first they did just nitpick the heck out of me the whole first year or so that I was with them, and now they're getting me into, okay, now you need to be able to feel this yourself. What does your legs feel like? What did your arms feel like? What did your posture feel like? Not just in terms of making my own corrections, although that's a lot of it, but kind of to get my head out of it. And, oh, God, I need to think about how I want to try to explain this. One thing that Joe Sensei is trying to get me to do is to not think about the kata as I'm doing it, but then to try to remember the feeling, and then I can analyze it later. Because if I think too much about all the many corrections they've given me as I'm trying to do the move I'm doing, plus thinking about the next move I'm about to do, I'll freeze. Or I will make a serious mistake. And you can't do that in a fight. You can't think about, am I going to do this correctly? You just have to feel, and you just have to go. You just have to hit the guy. And you have to feel it in the moment, and if something didn't work right, then you make that adjustment in the next move. And yes, you have to think moves ahead, but you can't get too much in your head in a fight. So that's where we kind of are right now, trying to get me to not think so much as I'm doing the kata, but remember the feeling. Think about it as soon as I'm finished, and do the analysis then. And that's sort of the meditation in motion. Does that make sense, what I said?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can watch somebody do a form or a drill and tell if they were thinking about it. Even if I'm sitting there working with a partner and I throw a punch at them, I can tell if they thought about what they're doing instead of just reacted. And, I mean, it's blatantly obvious. And my Sifu constantly is like, you know, quit thinking about it, just react, you know. And even when you're doing the form, it's obvious. You can tell somebody who's sitting there thinking about every single movement, and it just becomes automatic. And something that we constantly strive for is to just let it become a part of you, to where it's just automatic, and it gets, you know, it's never perfect. You always refine it. And there's times where you have to stop and think about, like, is my positioning correct? Is my energy correct? Type of stuff, but ultimately you want it to be an automatic reaction, not a thought.
They let you stop in the middle of kata or forms?
Oh, if I were sitting there doing a form, my Sifu could come and correct all sorts of different movements within it. Yeah. If I'm sitting there, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, but are you supposed to stop? I mean, if I'm doing a kata and I stop in the middle of it to think, then most of the time I get reprimanded in some way. Like, well, you just lost that fight. You're stopping to think. So even if I'm going to do it wrong, they want me to just continue the movement and just do it. And there have been times where I've especially in the piñons. I've started one piñon and ended up doing the next piñon. And I realized partway through I made a mistake, but I just have to go with it. If I stop, you're not allowed to stop in a self-defense situation. If you stop to correct yourself in a self-defense situation, you're getting clobbered. So they would rather me just finish the movement, do it wrong, versus trying to stop.
Well, and I think that's where the system or training style differs. Within ours, like I said before, it's not a someone throws a punch, I do this. It's more of here's a technique we do, and this is the proper way to do it, and that's
Okay.
within our form. And so if I'm sitting there doing the form, I'm not doing it as if I'm fighting. I'm not doing it as if I'm reacting to an attack. It's me showing that I know the principle, the concept, the shape, the structure. And that's really what we focus on is more the structure and the shape. Are you doing it correctly? Because someone could put their arm out like they're holding a tray, which we call it a tansao. It's called palm up is the translation of tansao. It is literally palm up. It's like you're sitting there holding out a dinner tray. But there's infinite ways to do it. You could have your elbow out, you could have it in, you could have it halfway, you could have it like down relaxed, you could have it really tense. And we more focus on the concept behind it. Is it something that needs to be tense? Is it something where your elbow needs to be out in, halfway? Is it relaxed? Are you focused on the hand? Are you focused on the elbow? Are you focused on the forearm? And those are all things you can see and feel when you're working with a person. And the forms are the way you do it every day, and you focus on the energy, the concept principle behind each technique. And then when you actually do like Chi-Sao, which you've done before, sticky hands, you can feel if a person's too focused on their hand, if they're too focused on their elbow, if their elbow's too far in, if it's too far out, all the different nuances of it. And so it's not as much a direct application to an attack as more of I don't know how to explain it.
I'm understanding. I had forgotten there for a moment just because I'm so focused on kata being a record of attack that I had forgotten for a moment that's not how you guys see it. So it probably is perfectly acceptable for you to stop and think about what you're doing and correct versus for us, because this is basically shadow boxing and a record of a fight. It isn't acceptable for us to stop.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense to me when you call it shadow boxing. Now, that's something I hadn't really thought about. So kata, in a way, in your opinion, is kind of like shadow boxing. I mean, that to me, I can fully wrap my head around.
And I've been instructed to imagine opponents, and Joe Sensei says that he imagines ninjas coming at him when he's doing kata. He's imagining ninjas coming at him. And because I'm a Star Wars geek, he told me to imagine Sith. And I'm like, I'm not good enough to fight a Sith. I'm going to stick with, Stormtroopers or Inquisitors. So when I do weapons, I'm usually fighting Inquisitors, if you've seen Star Wars Rebels. And when I'm doing empty hand, I'm usually fighting Stormtroopers.
Okay, so Tim, do you do the same? Do you feel the same way? Do you feel that kata are, in a way, shadow boxing?
Personally, I started with the idea of shadow boxing and left it behind because for me, kata is only a collection of fighting principles displayed with the techniques shown in the given kata. So I have seen many demonstrations of kata applications with people attacking from around the compass point, and the guy slays around 70 people and all laying on the ground, and he stands there victorious. This is utter bullshit for me. So this is the only thing I have is, okay, I have a series of motions, like 1, 2 motions in total, and I can apply them in hundreds different ways. So I don't have really shadow boxing in mind. If I do kata, I also visualize the person attacking me. The way they attack me, or the way I counter attack them, is based on the application I have in mind at the moment, but not necessarily referring to shadow boxing at the moment.
So, do your two different perspectives conflict? Are they different, or do they kind of mesh depending on perspective?
I don't think they conflict each other. They highly complement each other. You can see kata as shadow boxing. You can see kata as a compilation of principles, and you think of ways how to apply these principles. It's just a personal approach to it.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, because I try not to always imagine the same attacks coming in all the time, because then I get locked in, this move is only for this attack. So I try to imagine different attacks coming in to keep my mind fluid and not locked in. I think we all agree on principles, principle-based training.
It really depends on the level of the practitioner. If you're on a beginner level, it is enough to know 1 or 2 applications for the movement at the moment. The way you progress in the martial arts, you move on and see different applications or different ways to use the motion you've learned years ago. There was the book of Professor Rick Clark. He wrote about the karate down block, and he just showed 79 applications for it. I would never recommend to teach a beginner, well, this is the first motion I'm going to teach you, and here are 79 ways to apply it. I will never see that student again.
No, you wouldn't.
I would give them 1 or 2 applications for that moment during the years we had.
So, are there kata that you don't teach to new people? Basically, are they more advanced? See, like in Wing Chun, you would never have a new student and you just teach them Fuji, for instance. That's like a very upper level form. Is there stuff like that within karate?
Yeah, there are kata that are more advanced, so to say. There is the Goju kata, both. Some people say it's only recommended to learn this kata when you are over 50 years old. I don't know why. I'm still practicing them, and I'm only 33. But I can see the idea behind that. A beginner, I won't teach kata like unsu with a lot of jumps, or I won't teach them what's called in any system, wanshu. We call it MP. Wanshu.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really teach it to beginners, because I teach classes up to 20, 30 people at once. If I have only 1 student, I would think of, okay, what kind of body type I have in front of me, and what motion or what way of moving is the best idea for this person. So I'm going to think which kata would fit this person best. So I'm going to teach this particular kata to that person. But if you have a class that big, you have to structure it in a way that almost everybody can take something out of it. So basically, I start with the Pinan Heian kata, all 5, and follow up with my Haji kata, and then see, okay, these people are around blue or brown belt level, and from there on we decide, okay, this is more the way you go, and one person learns the Basai kata, and the other person learns the Wansu kata because it mostly fits the body type.
We start with the Naihachis, all three of them, and I mean those are really advanced katas to start with because some of the crab stepping I won't be able to use that for another few years, honestly, in a fight. In some applications I can already use it, but other applications I can't. And I mean, those are just weird katas, just, the crab stepping, moving back and forth. And you see other schools doing these awesome katas with punches and kicks that are just like super cool. And here we start with the Naihachis, which are just really weird kata that you just really won't be able to comprehend for a few years. And I mean, Eric, something I feel is kind of like hazing, that if somebody can withstand these three kata at first, then they get to the cool stuff that's a lot easier to understand. So I got through all three Naihachis, and then I did all five Pinyons, and now I'm on Wansu. That's for the Okanon Kempo. For the Kobudo, that's actually done more based on my own needs. I didn't really think about that until you're talking about that now, Tim, that, yeah, the empty hand, I'm learning a lot more formalized. You do these kata in this order, and this is how you progress. But the Kobudo, the weapons, it's based on my own needs. So I learned 3 Jo kata before I ever learned a Fo kata, and Eric Sensei says he's never taught it that way before. It's usually like 1 or 2 Jo kata and then a Bo kata. But my needs were, at that time, were more Jo than Bo. And then depending on where I am, what I'm doing, he'll decide which weapons kata to teach me next. And he just taught me a Tombo kata because I bought some Tombo. And so it's like, oh, you have a new weapon? Okay, let me teach you the new kata. And at first I was like, no, Sensei, please don't, because I've learned, 3 kata in the last month, 2 in 1 day. And I was like, please don't teach me any more kata. And he's like, okay, I won't. And I'm like, I'm curious now, let's do it. Because both our better judgment. He started teaching me the Tombo kata that night just because I had the new weapons. And let's do it. So I assume that I'm going to start learning the Teko kata as soon as I get my Teko made for me, which I'm going to have custom made by a blacksmith. I'm going over to his house, and we're going to hang out for an afternoon, and he's got a custom made Teko to my hands, and it's going to be incredibly awesome. And I'll be ready for that kata.
I completely envy you.
Yeah, that's
I'm not even allowed to own Teko in Germany. It is a highly
this is Idaho. Nobody cares.
Same goes for nunchaku. I'm not even allowed to have these soft nunchaku.
Oh, that was when I was listing my weapons. I completely forgot nunchaku. So with that, when I'm talking about what everything teaches, Eric Sensei says that's the Tai Chi of weapons because it teaches body unity. If the flail side lags behind the handle side, then your body isn't unified. And also, if your body isn't unified, you're going to hit yourself in the head. And our tradition is live weapons. We don't use practice weapons. So I went from never having nunchaku, except for an illegal pair when I was a kid, but never really owning nunchaku, to live nunchaku, fully solid wood in my hands, and not being allowed to use foam. And so that's teaching me body unity pretty fast, because I don't want to hit myself in the head with them. And I've only hit myself in the head twice, softly both times. So I'm doing well.
A few years ago, we had a Kobudo seminar in Germany, and on the list of things which would be taught was nunchaku, and I was very curious. Wow, how would they do that with the restrictive laws in Germany? And tiny letters, I don't know the correct English term, that was written, we don't use actual nunchaku, we use a towel. And that was where I lost every interest in the seminar. Because I don't want to use a towel, pretend to use a nunchaku.
So you say you're not allowed to use even foam practice nunchaku?
Not at all. It's a deadly weapon in Germany, and you're not allowed to have some. Not that I have a few pairs of them. I don't.
You don't?
No, I don't. Because I'm not allowed to.
Right.
Sure you don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say that. I was picking up what you were laying down. But it's against the law in Germany to have even practice nunchaku.
Yeah, it's strictly against the law because it's called a choking weapon. So everything with a pair of chain or cord between two sticks is an item to choke anybody to death. So it's forbidden to have these.
Oh.
Okay, so I have a question. Sorry to change the subject.
Yeah, go for it.
So there seems to me, in the not in the know, a ton of different kinds of karate. You have Goju, whatever. I don't know all the names. Ryu,
Gojira.
Siku, whatever. Yeah, I don't know all the names. What's the difference? Is it like lineages in Wing Chun where it's the same moves just used differently, or what?
It's the teaching approach is different. The idea behind it, the principles are all the same.
So you can watch somebody from a different style, whatever, and know what they're doing. They maybe have the same kata, just the teaching approach is different, or what?
Yeah. So in my base is Shotokan, and if I watch a Bado practitioner, I see, okay, they have their hands a little higher than we do usually, or they have a little higher stances than we do, but mainly it's the same. Goju is a little different because Goju has a set of kata that is unique for Goju-ryu, but it totally translates to all other styles. A week ago, we had invited a Goju instructor to our dojo, and everything he taught was, well, the approach was different, but the outcome was the same. So we have 170 styles recognized worldwide, but overall the teaching approach is the only difference in it.
So you can tell by looking at someone, is it only when you see their kata, or when you see a move can you tell the difference?
You can say, okay, this guy might be from a Goju school, this guy might be from a Shushukan school or anything, because they put focus more on that particular movement, or the Goju guys are more soft than the Shotokan practitioners, but you can tell what they are doing.
Yeah, because I see people post stuff, and then people are like, oh, that's this kind of karate, whatever. So that's why I was wondering.
So
Yeah, I agree.
would like to talk about the health benefits of practicing forms in kata, because a lot of times when you are talking about martial arts, it's good for your health, and even a lot of old masters wrote about the health benefits of practicing karate or practicing martial arts in general. So what do you think are the benefits practicing forms of kata?
Yeah, can I take that one real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So
Go ahead.
So for me, a lot of health benefits. I mean, if you've been doing this for a while, you have old injuries. And I've mentioned before that I had to stop doing Kempo after only 5 months because I suffered a devastating injury that actually wasn't martial arts related, but I couldn't do Kempo anymore until that healed. And it's a permanent injury. My shoulder is always going to be bad. But the more martial arts I do, the better my shoulder feels. So after I was able to return to the martial arts and my Kempo school closed, and then I started doing Kaiju Kempo, my shoulder just improved from all the motion. And then every time I have to stop doing, the periods in which I stop training, my shoulder freezes up again. I start training and it loosens up again. And the thing that's been best for my shoulder is the Jo Kata Fushiku no Joichi. That fixed my shoulder right up. And if I ever have any shoulder pain, I do that kata and the pain goes away. That loosens it up more than anything else. There's also in Aikido the standard ground pin armbar ground pin where you have an armbar and you kind of roll the arm forward while pushing in the hand. That also loosens up my shoulder. So even when I'm not having problems with that shoulder, I tell everybody I'm going to tap out late on that side because I want the stretch. And I tell them it's going to feel like you're going to rip my shoulder. You're not going to. I will tap long before you rip my shoulder. And so they keep turning and turning and turning. And I'm pinned. I'm not moving. They did a good job pinning me, but I don't tap yet because I want that stretch. And they're like, this is crazy. I'm going to rip your shoulder. I'm like, nope, we're totally good. I'm going to tap long before we get to that point. And it fixes it right up. The first day of Aikido, my sensei did that stretch on me, and I felt a slight pop in my shoulder, and that was the scar tissue breaking. And he felt it too. He's like, oh my God, did I just hurt your shoulder? I'm like, I'm free for the first time in years. I'm free from, my shoulder is loose for the first time since the last time I was able to train. And so that started the journey of fixing my shoulder. Then the Joe Kata really continued that. I also have, as a bad knee from taking too many falling injuries onto that knee, people falling into my knee. And I went through physical therapy, and toward the end of that, my physical therapist said, at this point going forward, honestly, your kata that you're already doing is the best thing you can do. He said for most people, I would send them home with a list of exercises, and he did send me home with a list of exercises. And he said, but, honestly, do your kata. That will be the best thing for your knee. Only do these exercises if, for whatever reason, you can't do your kata, or if your knee gets a little bit worse over time, do this to get it back really quick. But honestly, I don't even do the physical therapy anymore because, as you guys know, I practice kata constantly, and that's my physical therapy for my knee. So those two injuries, kata fixes me right up. And those are permanent injuries.
So how about the Wing Chun approach to health benefits?
Yeah, so Wing Chun is known for a lot of older people doing it. It's something you can do up until, Ip Chun, which is one of, Ip Man, who's one of the most famous Wing Chun practitioners that everybody knows. He was the teacher of Bruce Lee. His son, Ip Chun, he's like, I think 95 years old now. And he still teaches, but also does the forums and everything. It's really has a lot of health benefits because it's something you can do as you get older, if you're weak, if you are disabled. It's very meditative. Some people have an approach where we call it Heigung, which is, Kung means work. And Heigung is breath work. A lot of people do a lot of breathing exercises and meditative exercises while they're doing the forms. I think Wing Chun or something you could 5 years old, 5 years old. It's something that would always benefit you, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Some people really get into the spiritual side of Wing Chun. That's just depends on the lineage and the way you see it. But, there's certain people who see it purely as a fighting art. There's people who see it as a meditation. There's people who see it as a spiritual thing, and that just depends on the lineage. But, yeah, I think whenever I do the forms, I complete it. To me, it is a meditation in that I completely zone out and I just let my body do the movements, and it's something I will continue to do forever. It's my core meditative, but also relates to fighting set of motions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Especially because I do Tai Chi too. That makes total sense.
In my work, I work as a physio. Years ago, I started implementing 2 kata for physiotherapy. I worked 15 years in a neurological rehab, mostly with stroke patients, MS or Parkinson's. Especially for MS patients, the Naihanchi kata is the best tool to train them because Naihanchi focuses for them a lot on leg strengthening. So MS patients have a lot of problems controlling their legs, especially controlling their knees. The way the Teki or Naihanchi kata trains the quadriceps of the quads and the hamstrings is very unique, and it's so brilliant to let these people do this kata without thinking about self-defense or anything fighting related. It's a good exercise for the core muscles, and like I said, especially for the legs. My professor or the head of medicine from the rehab said, okay, it's a unique approach, but please keep on doing it because you are providing the patients with a workout for themselves at home. They can do it without any tools they need. They don't need resistance band or anything else. They can do it in every place. They don't need much space for it, and it doesn't take much time. As Amy, you know, the first Naihanchi kata doesn't take roughly more than 30 seconds to go through. You can adapt it. You can go lower into stance to make it a little more difficult. And I really, really love to do that with the patients because it's so highly beneficial. I can give them a set of exercises, but on the one hand, they won't do it because these exercises mostly are completely boring. And if you give them more than 3 exercises, they will forget them. So having this set of motions in a complete training exercise, it's a really great thing. And for Parkinson's, we had a colleague sent to Boston from Germany, and he came back and said, well, I learned this new concept. It's called the big concept. Parkinson patients have to do very large, very huge motions. This is highly beneficial for them. And I instantly thought, okay, I'm going to teach every Parkinson patient of mine the Pinan Nidan or the Heian Shodan kata because it is easy to learn the motions and all these motions are very large. So it's highly beneficial for them. So kata is a therapy vehicle for me in my everyday work. And I can see it in hundreds of patients as a very beneficial thing for them.
Do they understand that they're learning kata?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
I tell them, okay, we're doing something that is called kata. I give them 5 minutes of history of what they are going to do now. But I also tell them we are not focusing on the fighting aspect. We are not focusing on the self-defense aspect because that's not what you need. You need to be able to have a structured workout that is highly beneficial for you. So I'm not going to give you a shitload of exercises. This is the one thing you need, and you're going to be good with it.
That's pretty awesome. So you said Heian Nidan?
Heian Shodan, and in the Pinan lineage, it's Pinan Nidan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so okay, so that's why I was trying to figure out which one it was. It's my Pinan Nidan.
Genau.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can totally see that working. Wow, cool.
That is really cool.
I changed workplaces a year ago. I left the rehab because the working conditions were very, very bad, and I said, okay, I need to go to a small clinic. My boss came over to me and said, what are you doing with your patients? They're very happy with what you're doing, and I'm interested in it. I told him, and he said, okay, let's make it, a self-payment thing. I know in the US you have to pay for physio yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, so he wanted to make it so they had to pay for that specific training that you were giving.
Exactly. So he said, okay, how much people can we get into a group? How many lessons do they need to be proficient in this exercise so that we can have another group to have a good revenue stream?
Yeah, so he was more worried about the money than the actual healing.
He has to be worried about the money because we are way underpaid in Germany. So you cannot live from patients who came with normal insurance stuff to us. I don't know the correct English terms for that.
No,
You get it?
we get
That's
what you
okay.
mean.
Yeah.
So it is, today it's very necessary to move in that direction. And so we have found a way to earn good money and have happy patients.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that's what's important. You know, so my grandmaster Samuel Kwok, he does, and I don't know if there's a similar in Japanese arts, but we do what's called qigong, which is energy work, is the direct English translation, and it's kind of like Tai Chi, but it's usually more stationary. I mean, the more advanced versions include movement. But within Wing Chun, it works really well with Wing Chun. It includes a lot of breath work and energy work where there's a thing side to it. Is there something similar in Japanese art?
You broke up just a little bit. Is there a what side to it?
A healing and a fighting side to it. So basically, like Qigong, you learn how to be more devastating as a fighter, but also has a healing side to it.
Yeah, we do that. Well, I do Qigong, but I do that as a part of my Tai Chi. And so that would be Chinese, not Japanese or Okinawan. And Eric Sensei is teaching me a lot of Nigong, which is more internal Tai Chi and meditations. And so from a Japanese or Okinawan point of view, I guess Sanchin Kata would be that.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I do so much, and Eric Sensei also does so much, for me it's hard to, in my mind, go, okay, which comes from which country. But I think Sanchin would be really the primary one in Okinawa and Japanese martial arts, but Tim's the historian.
Yeah, I agree. Sanchin is mostly referred to be the kata for that purpose.
And are there other katas for that purpose, or is the fact that Eric
In
Sensei and I are
Goju,
doing these things, is that just us mixing what we already do?
Goju also has it's called Tensho. It's a softer variant of Sanchin. Not in the way it's executed, but the main idea behind it. Sanchin seems to be pretty strong, pretty hard on the body, and Miyagi found that you need something contrary to it, so he invented Tenshu Kata. So you have a very soft breathing kata with very soft motions compared to the Sanchin Kata.
So would that be taught to somebody who wasn't physically or energetically strong enough for Sanchin?
It's a complementary thing. Not
Okay.
you build them up with Sanchin and you give them the idea. Okay, this is how you relax.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I've only done Sanchin a couple of times. It's not actually a part of my lineage of Okinawan, Kempo, and Kobudo, but there are people who in my lineage who have done Goju-Ryu. So I do have senseis who know it and are teaching it to me. I just started reading a book about Sanchin, so I've asked my sensei to teach it to me after I finish the book, or even as I'm going through the book, I'm highlighting questions and things that I have. So that's something I'll be doing more of in the next few weeks to months. But as of right now, I've only done Sanchin just a handful of times, and I've only done it following my sensei. I haven't really learned to do it on my own yet.
There is so much stuff to talk about kata left here.
We need
Let's
a
wrap it
Kata
with
3.0.
yeah,
Oh,
we
totally.
definitely need that.
I
Let's
feel
wrap it
like
with
I've left with a new understanding of kata, honestly, and that's a big thing because coming into this, I didn't really have much of a idea of what to expect or what it was. So you guys have definitely opened my eyes to a new perspective on kata. I'm
so
still
we
gonna have to stop and process everything you guys have said and see how it applies to what I understand of martial arts, but it's something I now can wrap my head around.
okay.
And we
Let's
need
finish
some.
with yeah, sure.
Oh, I was
Sorry.
just gonna repeat that when Robert comes to visit, and it's less than 2 months now, 6 or 7 weeks. We should have time to go off aside and discuss this, and not and be able to show each other these things. And then maybe after that, we can do Kata 3.0.
Oh, I think that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it because it's going to be a huge learning experience for me for sure.
It's gonna be a mind-blowing weekend, that's for sure.
Okay, let's wrap it with
Okay.
a final question.
hmm
Is creating your own kata a good thing or
Uh,
is it a bad thing? Because there are so many kata out there. Do we need a new kata or is it a good lesson for yourself to invent or create your own kata or form for Wing Chun?
In Wing Chun, only at the highest level would you be not allowed, quote, but would anyone accept it? You would only have to be at the highest level of proficiency to be able to create a new form. So there are certain grandmasters, whatever you want to call them, who have created new forms, and they have to be really, really, really good for it to be accepted outside of their lineage. I don't know if that same thing applies to Japanese arts, but in Chinese, you have to be really good to make something new.
I think that
You,
for an advanced person to do something new, to create a new form, that's probably fine. But for a beginning student or color belt student, do they actually really know enough? And it ends up being just sort of martial arts dance. And I'm probably going to have a whole bunch of people hate me for saying this, but I do know people who, as part of their green belt test, had to create a kata and put it to music. And they tell me this, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so nice. And inside I'm screaming, oh my god, that's not kata. That's martial arts
Yeah,
dance.
yeah, that's
And
cute.
yeah, exactly. That's yeah, yeah, cute. And I mean, what do they really know about fighting at that point? What are they really able to do? But if you take the point of view that kata is a record of a fight, if from the defender's point of view, if somebody has a fight and did something new within the fight and formalizes that, then that might be kind of cool, and I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from doing that.
Yeah, I think you're being a little bit,
Generous?
yeah, generous.
I actually, at green belt level, I let people invent their own kata to understand kata in a better way. I stole this idea from a video I saw from Jesse Enkamp. So I partner them up and I give them 5 attacks they have to react to. A shove, a hook, a straight, a kick, and a grappling attempt. So, and they have to figure out what fits them best for these kinds of attacks. And we're going through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if they have the motion come to a flowing motion, I say, okay, now remove the partner and do it or reenact this thing on your own. And see, this is your kata. This is how kata was created or this is a way how kata was created. So it's not that they have to create the kata and keep on practicing it. It's more like, okay, this is what's behind the idea of kata. If that
See,
makes sense.
I think that's really cool. I mean, but to me, and that's where I'm struggling to see the difference between and I think I do. I'm just gonna have to think on it, but to see the difference between a drill and a kata. Because to me, like I could tell somebody, okay, I'm gonna do this, 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 and this. Maybe a hook, a low punch, and then a kidney strike. What are you gonna do? Different Wing Chun practitioners may react differently depending on size, height, weight, whatever. And that's where, to me, that would be more of a drill, but I know that kata isn't a drill. It's beyond that. And so that's where I'm going to have to think about.
Well, if you accept Eric Sensei's definition that the difference between kata and drill is kata is attack agnostic, then maybe that gets you to where you want to be. But I do think that's really cool, Tim, having people construct a kata in that way.
It makes them think of what kata actually teaches them.
Yeah.
They angle off, they use different arm motions, they use different body motions, and they say, okay, look what you did there. You can find it in the Heian kata. You can find it in whatever they are learning at that point. So they can recognize much better what they are doing in the actual kata they are learning.
And they're doing it for their own education. They're not, I bet you anything your students are not choosing flash that would score well in competition. I bet you anything your students are doing things that would actually work in an actual fight.
My students don't do competition at all. Not that I would forbid it, but I say I'm not a competition guy at all, and I'm disgusted by the idea that kata is used for competition.
Yeah, I think the idea of what you were saying, they also find out what works for them, because what works for them might not work for someone else, right?
Yeah, right. And that's why we have this ridiculous amount of numbers of kata. Because if I do this with 30 people in a class and we have 30 different kata, and I say, look, same problem solved with different solutions, and that's why we have so many kata, and you here created 30 new ones. And now let's forget about that, because we have systems we can relate to.
That's pretty cool. Go
ahead.
Oh, I just quickly want to say something about kata in competition, and that is Eric Sensei does competition kind of for the purpose of promoting traditional martial arts. And he's awesome and amazing, but his kata doesn't always score well, because if the judges aren't a traditional martial artist, they're not going to be able to understand what he's doing. And at the last and that's fine with him, because he says at the end of every competition, somebody will come up to him and say, hey, I understand what you did, and that was really cool. So at the last tournament that we went to, I originally wanted to compete, but I was recovering from that cold from hell that I had. I wasn't contagious, so I felt okay going, but I just wasn't up to competing. So, he was. So he went to compete, and I just went to go with him and to support him and all the other local martial artists that I wanted to see and reconnect with. Because I go to these events mainly to be social. And before the competition, we got there early, and he's like, hey, let's do some training while we're waiting for the tournament to start. So we're in this gym, and we're going through our kata. We're doing some drilling, and then we're going through the kata, and I look up, and I realize every single person is watching us, including all the black belts, and they're watching us really intently. And I'm like, well, I might as well have decided to compete today, because I'm basically doing it right now. Every single person here is watching us. And then the tournament actually started, and his kata, the judges, the higher the rank the judge, the higher the score they gave him. The lower rank the judge, the lower the score they gave him. the last kata he performed that day had a lot of really subtle hip motion, a lot of really subtle power generation that the highest ranked judge, I can't remember what his rank was, 8th or ninth degree black belt, scored him 9.5. The lowest ranked judge, who was a teenager junior black belt, scored him 6, which was ridiculous, but she had no idea what she was even looking at. So she scored him 6 is like just higher, barely higher than average. And when the scores went up, I mean, everybody just kind of laughed. The judges who knew what they were looking at thought it was amazing, gave him 9.5. The judge who had no idea what she was looking at gave him a 6. And we ended up, because I wasn't feeling well, we left a little bit early. Normally he stays to judge the sparring, but I needed to get home. I just wasn't feeling well. And as we were leaving, this guy stops us and says, "Hey, I just want to let you know that I understand your kata. I understand what you're doing, and I think you're amazing." Which is what Eric Sensei says happens to him at the end of just about every competition. And he's like, "Oh, thank you." And then the guy turned to me and said, I saw what you were doing too, and I can see what you're doing, and you're doing great as well. And I was like, "Well, thank you." And the guy was like, "Well, I just wanted to say, thank you for performing today." And so is that sort of martial arts evangelism or that sort of traditional martial arts evangelism? That's the reason why he does tournaments. He also got another student out of that one. One of the guys he was competing against recognized that Eric Sensei has just all this really amazing subtle body movements that he does, and he has this really amazing way of interpreting kata, especially weapons kata, that I've never encountered before, and it's pretty rare. So one of the black belts he was competing against was like, "Hey, can you train sometimes? Can you teach me some of what you know?" So that's his purpose of doing competition, and also part of my purpose when I finally do start competing will be this traditional martial arts evangelism, this subtlety of motion, not just popping everything because it looks pretty, not all the flash, but actually doing something that would actually work in a real fight.
If I would attempt to do that in Germany, my name would be wrecked to shit.
Really?
Yeah. The karate community is very, very toxic. If you're not doing this in the competitive way, you're not knowledgeable, you're not a good teacher, you're not a good martial artist at all, you know nothing. So my brother wanted to compete when he was 15 or 16 years old, and he said, "Well, I'm going to do Teki." The judges said to him, "You're not allowed to do that. You have to do something more catering to the eye for the audience. Teki is not the thing people want to see." And he stood there and said, "Well, but Teki shows exactly if I understood karate or not." No, you haven't got the point. So choose something else or leave. And that was the point where we both said, "Okay, competition in this country sucks ass. We're leaving."
Wow. That's sad, but I'm really glad that you and your brother are sticking with what actually works and not going for flash because you got egos involved and you want trophies. So I really commend you guys for your integrity.
Yeah. I won't sell myself to the competition devil. Never.
Good for you.
All right, guys, I think we should wrap it up. That was really good, and I want to do a more talk about it, but yeah, we need to get into a whole nother discussion because I have a lot of questions to ask you guys, but we'd go on for another hour or two. So
yeah.
Well, let's continue this in July when you come up to train with Rory, and then we'll do Kata 3.0 sometime after that.
That would be awesome because I'm sure I'll have a whole new understanding.
Cool, and I want to do Chisao Doos. I've never actually done it with a real Wing Chun guy. So that's what I want from you when you come.
Yeah, I think you're going to learn a lot too.
That would be amazing. That would be terrific. I would love to.
So, okay, thank you everybody for listening to our very extended conversation about Kata 2.0. Hope you enjoy it, and leave a comment, leave a like on YouTube, maybe subscribe even to our channel, and hope to see you next time.